This coming Sunday, this is going to be in the New York Times Sunday magazine. How fake news turned a small town upside down. Here's the subhead. At the height of the 2016 election, exaggerated reports of a juvenile sex crime brought a media maelstrom to Twin Falls, Idaho. A maelstrom the city has still not recovered from. Joining us now is the reporter from that piece, Caitlin Dickerson, who's the national immigration reporter for the New York Times. Ms. Dickerson, I really appreciate you being here.
Thank you for having me.
Can you tell us basically what you found in Twin Falls? Before reading your story, I had heard about there being anger ginned up against Chobani yogurt, and I'd heard there had been this lawsuit involving Alex Jones and InfoWars. What did you find when you chased that story down?
Sure. So to begin with, there was a very real sexual assault case that took place there between a 5-year-old girl who was a white American and a 7-year-old boy who was a refugee. But it was turned into something much larger and much scarier than that in fake news stories with lots and lots of details that turned out to be completely untrue and that were used to prove a point that refugees were inherently dangerous, that Muslims were inherently dangerous, and it was elevated nationally. At a certain point, Chobani and other local officials, national officials were brought in. It was turned into this conspiracy theory.
So there was a real incident, again, involving a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old. It was represented in false news stories about that as if there had been basically a gang rape of a child by adults, and that it had been a either racially motivated or at least racially inflected assault.
That it was influenced by religion is what the narrative was. Yes, that the young girl was gang raped, that she was held at knife point, that it was done by Syrian refugees, even though there are no Syrian refugees in this town at all, that it was done by adults, even though it was an altercation with a 7-year-old, and that all of it was proof that ISIS was in this town and the town was under attack.
So how did this manifest in the town? It's one thing if a series of fake stories are circulating about a place in the United States. What did you find about how this manifested in people's real lives in Twin Falls?
People felt this really viscerally and really intensely for an entire summer. So this started to be reported in online blogs and then moved to larger outlets like Breitbart, like InfoWars. And during that time, specific elected officials in town were called out by name. Their addresses and phone numbers and email addresses were posted online, and they were barraged for an entire summer really intensely with these incredibly violent and specific threats. So obviously for the people who were receiving those threats, they were very scared. Police had to patrol their homes. They talk about being scared to walk out to their cars after work. So one woman, the mayor's wife, says she did Charlie's Angels in her home. Every time the doorbell rang, she would instinctively kind of duck under the kitchen counter because she was getting these, again, very specific and graphic threats. And then for people who live in town, they were reading online that their town was under assault by dangerous sexual deviants. So they were scared too.
This is something that, as you say, was promoted heavily by Breitbart. You describe in the piece about how Steve Bannon on his Breitbart radio show talked about this daily.
Yes.
For a long time. They dispatched a full-time reporter to go to Twin Falls to not necessarily report on the story, but at least to hype it.
Yeah, the reporter's name is Lee Stranahan. Steve Bannon described him as a pit bull on Breitbart Radio and said he was going to let Stranahan loose on the town. And the idea, the conceit, they said, was to reveal the true story, because they were writing and saying on the radio that the local police, the prosecutor, even the local newspaper were involved in a cover-up, that they were trying to conceal the crime, when actually they were just trying to say, look, something did happen. It was very unfortunate and very sad, but it doesn't have anything to do with Islam or ISIS or refugee resettlement. It's something sad that happened between two kids.
Mr. Stranahan has now ended up working for Sputnik.
Yes, he quit his job at Breitbart after Steve Bannon left Breitbart. He said it was being mismanaged, and he now hosts a drive time radio show. For Sputnik? For Sputnik, yes.
And one of the things that we've since learned about this incident is that this is one of the, for lack of a better term, fake news stories in the United States that Russian operatives latched onto and promoted, but that they also appear to have tried to organize demonstrations around in Twin Falls. They tried to make real-life events happen in Twin Falls around this story, and those organizing efforts were traced back to Russia.
They were. In fact, it's the first known attempt that the Russian government made to conjure up a political rally on American soil. That took place in Twin Falls, in addition to these accounts having spread again, these false details that we talked about. The protest itself wasn't massively attended. It turns out that a lot of people who were upset about the case were in other states, even other countries. But nevertheless, it happened. I mean, people did show up and they protested, and all of it was at the behest of these Russian-linked accounts.
Caitlin Dickerson, national immigration reporter for the New York Times. It's on one level, just disgusting. On the other hand, absolutely fascinating story. And the depth that you were able to put into your reporting on this really, I think, helps us understand its import. Thanks a lot for helping us understand.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
I appreciate
Thanks.
it.
All right, we'll be right back. Stay with us.